Okay, we're live.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the decision days of myself. I'm Nick Adams-King. I'm the Executive Lead Member for Universal Services at Hampshire County Council, and of my colleague Russell Oppenheimer, who is the Executive Member for Countryside and Regulatory Services. As usual, the decision day is being broadcast in one session live on YouTube via the County Council website. There are a number of our colleagues with us, so along with Russell, I'd like to welcome Tim Groves, who's representing the opposition, Liberal Democrats, and also Sarah Pankhurst from the Independent Group. We might be joined by Kim Taylor from Labour in a little bit, and also the Chair and Vice Chair of the Select Committee, who holds us to account, Rob McAtter and Jackie Branson. So welcome to you all, and thanks to all the officers for coming along to talk to us about the various things that we've got to decide this afternoon. There are no deputations, so we'll head straight on to the first item on the agenda, which interestingly is the contract for diver services. Patrick.
Thank you, Councillor Adams-King. You're correct. It's the contract for diver services. The reason it's first on the agenda is actually a key decision because the length of the contract and the value. And it's really, we have about 2,000 bridges, of which 500 of them need inspecting. Many of them are, their foundations are near or underwater, as well as culverts. So we need a contract for diver services in place such that we can get the right people in doing those inspections with the right gear. There's quite a lot of detail in the paper. Hopefully it's self-explanatory. If you want any more detail, I've got Tim here who can provide any more detail, but hopefully the paper is relatively straightforward. Thank you.
Yes, I have to say I had a briefing on this, which was somewhat surprising, but really interesting, actually. I'm not sure whether Sarah and Tim had the same briefing that Russell and I had, but who knew that we needed divers? But when it's explained to you, it's actually a very clear point as to why we'd need them. Any questions or comments, or anyone would like any more detail about this? Tim or Sarah?
No special comments.
All good. And Rob and Jackie, sorry, you were there as well for the for our briefing about it. Any questions from you?
No.
No. Okay, Russell?
No, nothing from me on this one.
No. Okay. So, I mean, essentially, the divers provide, you know, an absolutely vital service for us in being able to check on the bridges and the parts of the bridges that are underwater, and also being able to access sort of some of the other areas where we need to access very constrained and sort of small constricted places. So a pretty vital part of the work that we do, albeit it's not something that we do all the time at all. So the recommendations are in paragraphs 2 to 4 on page 5 of the papers. I'm very happy to agree those, thanks Patrick. And we've got a contract for divers for the next few years, so all good. The next one on our agenda is the project appraisal update for Southampton and South West Hampshire's Transforming Cities Fund. This is a piece of work that's been going on for a little while. So Patrick and Ben, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Adams-King. You're absolutely right. This is an update of the project appraisals for 2 schemes that have changed slightly. One is the Blue Star service, which is about corridor improvements along the Bishopstoke Road. And also there is the Providence Hill cycle route as well. There's again quite a lot of detail in the report itself about the changes, the rationale behind that. But if I may, I'm going to hand over to Ben Smith, who might just give us the headlines for those schemes, if I can. Thank you. Ben?
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. So as you said, the report covers 2 schemes, part of the Southampton Transforming Cities Fund, Providence Hill, which is cycle route. The reason that's come back to this decision day is there's been some changes to the scope of the project and also some variations in terms of the costs. So it's just making sure that they are reported and there's an opportunity to make a decision on those, the revised scheme. It basically is a missing link or part of a missing link on a wider cycle route that links to the national cycle route at either end of the section on Providence Hill that we're talking about. That's the Providence Hill cycle element. And the second part is the Blue Star 2 corridor along Bishopstoke Road and the slightly wider area, which is a series of bus priority measures at traffic signals. effectively time advantaging the buses at the traffic signals. There is another element of the original scheme for Bishopstoke Road, which is covered in the overall capital programme report, which is, I think, agenda item 4 as well, which is taking that down a slightly different route for delivery, but still delivering the project. So this report focuses on Providence Hill cycle route and the Blue Star 2 corridor bus priority measures.
Super, thanks very much. And again, we've talked through this in some detail ahead of today's meeting. Let me check with my colleagues whether anyone would like to say anything. Tim, you got any comments?
Yes, just a few comments. Just help me on this. I'm very concerned about, or actually, they're probably comments in general, but I'm concerned that we've not got a continuous route anymore with the cycleway. I think that it's a problem in many places in the county where we've got these little bits of cycleway that are sort of unusable, and people can't get on them or off them and don't know how to use them, and therefore we don't get any usage by the cyclists. And I'm just concerned that that might be happening with this scheme as well, that it's not really going to make things better for cyclists because it's not continuous. And of course the routes are still a danger for cyclists when we haven't done it, because a lot of our roads, including probably the A27, are not really safe for use by cyclists on themselves. And then just on the Blue Star 2, very pleased to see that you're proposing some improvements to the junctions for buses. I see there's 14 junctions you're intending to improve. I think that's exactly what's needed. I don't know quite how you're going to do it in some of the junctions, but certainly there's a lot of congestion on those junctions, and I think helping them would be good. So I don't quite know how you're going to do it, but obviously I've seen a few key junctions on that route, but not 14. So just be interested. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Ben, did you want to come back about the the challenges that we have with joining up some of the different bits of the continuous route?
Sure, yeah, no problem at all. So there will initially be still a sort of a short missing section on Providence Hill, which is the bit around the Windover roundabout. But it's not that is not happening, it's just happening to a different timescale. So essentially there is some National Highways work at that roundabout, which originally was planned to happen sort of to a similar programme that we're delivering the cycle route at Providence Hill. Unfortunately, they need to do a bit more design work because they were unsuccessful in terms of their planning consent and their land assembly. So they've had to go back and redesign that and reprocure that somewhat, but they will still deliver the final bit of the route as part of their scheme when it comes forward. So it's still on the programme and it still will happen. It's just there will be a slight time lag between that starting and completing and our work starting. So that element will be completed, albeit not to the same time scale. And I think in terms of the Blue Star 2 corridor, the time advantage in the buses is with the sort of technology solutions at the traffic signals. So it's kind of transponders on the buses that kind of time advantage them when they come up to traffic signals to hopefully give them a kind of a more free flowing route through the signals. And that's the fundamentals of that scheme.
Thanks very much. So 14 traffic signal junctions we think we've got. Okay, that's what it's all about. So thank you. Yeah.
And the good news is that because they're linked to the buses, then it's not something that necessarily holds everybody up until such time as the buses prioritise going through the junctions using that system. So that works quite well for us. And as I say, hopefully Providence Hill is delivered. It just doesn't kind of fall quite within the current time frame that we hope at the minute because of those National Highways works being delayed a little bit.
Thank you very much.
Sarah, this is kind of at the edge of your patch, really, but
it is. I do know it. It's. I was concerned about the fact that the Windover roundabout section was missing, but I've been reassured by Ben's comments. I wouldn't want to see that fall by the wayside, but happy otherwise.
Super, thanks. And Rob or Jackie?
No, nothing for me.
Nothing.
No. Okay. Russell?
I don't have a lot to say, but I will just commend the team for their excellent work in bidding for the funds from the Transforming Cities Fund. Hampshire did very well in that whole process. and it's great to see that money being used to very good effect with these schemes.
It's certainly when we were opening the Eastleigh town centre improvements just before Christmas, it was great to see actually some really practical things on the ground which do link up with all the work that's been going on in Southampton, where they similarly have been using money from the same fund, and not least to just recently complete all of the work around the station. So it's been a really good project for Southampton and for the surrounding area, which helps a lot. And it's good to know that although unfortunately the Providence Hill scheme is put back a little bit by this, the work's still going to be carried out. So the recommendations are in paragraphs 3 to 7. They're on pages 11 to 12. And so you can see those there if you look at the agenda, which is online. I'm very happy to approve those. Thanks very much, Ben. That's all good.
Thank you.
And we move on to the thing that we were talking about most this morning. The substantive item, or one of the 3 substantive items at the Select Committee this morning, which is the change to our traffic management policy, or the update to it rather, which provides for 20 mile per hour speed limits and zones. That's on pages 25 to 62 of the report, and we spent a good amount of time this morning at the Universal Services Select Committee talking that through. Patrick and Martin, I think this one.
Thank you, Councillor Evans-King. Yeah, I agree. A really good discussion at this morning's Select Committee, and some really good points put forward. I mean, the paper really speaks for itself, but in essence, what it is, it's the culmination of a huge amount of work on behalf of the officer team, following some recommendations that were put forward to the Select Committee about a year ago now from the Task and Finish Group on how we can bring forward a change to the policy that can allow communities to bring forward potentially 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, subject to meeting certain criteria, but also on a full cost recovery basis for the County Council for the reasons we know about. I'm going to bring Martin in here just to take us through the headlines of the report, but hopefully very helpful to hear the detail. So Martin, please.
Thank you, Patrick. Yes, the revised policy position moves away from considering 20-mile speed limits and zones from a purely casualty reduction perspective to one that considers strategic function of the road, encouraging active and sustainable transport options, the road environment and compliance. Locations with a history of injury collision will continue to be progressed and funded by the County Council. The revised policy, in essence, seeks to encourage wider use of 20 restrictions in appropriate locations where drivers are most likely to respect a lower speed limit.
Sorry, super, thanks. Sorry about the cat. The cat was travelling at more than 20 miles an hour. We've had a good sort of chat through this morning. Tim, though, did you want to come back? I know you made some very useful comments this morning in the discussion we had.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, I think what you need in front of your desk is a SID, speed to identify, so that the cat knows what speed it's going. I thought that was a very good point that you made this morning. I think that's an excellent idea to have SIDs everywhere, that you have a 20-mile-an-hour zone. If you're serious about enforcing it, or people, obeying that speed limit, it seems as though you need one everywhere. And nowadays you can do it. A few years ago you probably couldn't, but now you can. So, but I do think, this policy is still, I'm afraid, just because we haven't got the fund, it's sort of out of touch with the new highway code hierarchy. We're not sort of prioritising pedestrians and cyclists and vulnerable users. We're not prioritising social isolation, the issue that people don't come out because they don't feel safe on the road, or the footpaths and roads are not safe for them, or the cars are all going too fast by them, that sort of thing. It doesn't help those with protected characteristics, of course, for those sort of issues. I mentioned this morning about the abdication of responsibility for improving the highway by Hampshire. I think that is still the case. It certainly is financially. Yes, I do like the idea of local input, but I think there is also advice needed by Hampshire, and I think it should be a lot better than what we've got. It should be we should have a policy for encouraging 20-mile-an-hour zones and saying how you do it, rather than saying we can't do it because it's all too difficult, we haven't got the resources, etc., that sort of thing. And I'm also a bit surprised the police are currently not supporting Speedwatch. I didn't know about that, so just be interested to hear more. I don't know whether now's the right time, if you can tell me, but otherwise later. Thank you.
Super thanks. What I'll do is let me wrap up in a minute. If you don't mind hanging on, I'm happy to kind of address a couple of those points as we get to the end. Sarah.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm actually in favour of it. The only concerns I have is the cost effect of the onus to be on the in Farehams case in the borough councils having to pay for the scheme. There is going to be a high demand, I'm sure. The police, I mean, I think that the public will need to remember that the police are not going to be out there checking for 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. But I think the idea is a good one. I think that it does help the local residents to be able to at least apply. I think that they need to have a checklist as well, because there's quite a few requirements made, and it would be better for the residents to be able to go through the checklist to save time and money on having to apply locally. But yeah, actually I'm in favour of it, just with those little tweaks. Thank you.
Super, thanks. Rob, do you want to mention the debate this morning, which I think was a good one?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I think it's a very, very helpful debate this morning, and I think the Martin's presentation was extremely useful. To my mind, we had a big consultation in the last committee about this, and there's clearly strong feelings on many sides of the debate, and that was aired in the committee this morning. My take on what the council is doing is they're giving power to local communities who A can show they're in favour, and B have the funding to do it. And I think that's a significant change from where we were a year ago. And I think that clearly I understand the point that Tim puts forward, that the county council should be doing more. We're all so aware of what the financial constraints are, and I think in light of that, saying where communities do want to move forward with local 20-mile-an-hour limits, we're giving them the scope to do that. And I think that's a significant step forward. The other thing I really liked was the idea this morning of actually a review after 12 months to see how we're getting on, to see how the application process has worked, see the allocation of time. I think that's a really powerful thing for us to come back in a year's time and just see what's worked and what hasn't worked, and whether we need to do further, and whether we need to change or improve the system. So I think that's a very healthy thing for the county councillors to have done.
Super, thanks. Jackie, did you want to add anything to that?
No, just I think the scheme is good. You're not going to get you know, too many random 20-mile-an-hour sort of in the middle of nowhere that isn't necessary. My main concern is I want to see more outside schools, and that's one thing I would like to see. But I think that is covered. But I think that's important, especially ones only at drop-off and pick-up time. But that's all really I've got to say.
Yep, super, thanks. And Russell.
I think I'd just like to say that I'm a strong supporter of this new policy, and I think it just shows really good collaboration between the select committee and you as the exec member, and so I'm really pleased that we've reached this point today.
And I think we should recognise actually it was you as the exec member when you were in my job that started all of this off. So you know, thanks to you for beginning the entire conversation in the first place. I think we should recognise two things. First off, that there's been an enormous amount of work that's gone into this, and Patrick and Tim and Martin and the team have been assiduous in looking at all the different options, at looking at what was going on elsewhere, and they've been very patient with me as I've asked them question after question to go, well, why can't we do this, and why can't we do it that way, and so on. But also the select committee, and Tim and Rob and Jackie were all part of that process of looking at a task and finish group to come up with a scheme and come up with ideas as to how this might be delivered. I think it's worth reflecting that we last year went through that process of taking evidence and looking at it in some detail and looking at how it was managed elsewhere. The select committee came up with some proposals about how it might be managed, and I hope that this policy, whilst not completely following what the select committee was looking at, at least keeps to the principle of that and to the spirit of what they wanted us to do. Throughout this, my main concern has been to ensure that we give a route for communities to bring this forward should they wish to do so. And as the year has gone on, and I've found myself in various different fora talking to different groups of parishes and to people, it's become clear that there's an enormous amount of support for 20-mile-an-hour zones, but equally there are as many people and as many communities that don't want them. As I've said quite often before, if you want to reduce speed on your road, reducing the speed limit doesn't necessarily do so. And that's why having this policy that says we will support speed indicator devices, we will support and require the introduction of those kind of measures alongside any reduction to support the reduction in speed, where we know that the police don't have the resources to be able to enforce it, is an important part of this. It is, in many senses, I know there are a lot of people that wished us to follow the Welsh example and to introduce this as a blanket 20-mile-an-hour policy across all of our 30-mile-an-hour zones. To do so would have cost us approximately a third of our entire highway budget, £20 million. And so it's just simply not affordable for us to do that. And that's why we're looking to the communities to find ways by which they can help fund it themselves. We, in most of our districts and boroughs, have community infrastructure levy and Section 106 agreements which provide funding for highway improvements. And so I hope that for an awful lot of the county that will be able to fund the kind of improvements should communities want them. Not every district and borough has parishes. That's certainly the case as well. But equally, we recognise that there's a route, hopefully, that community groups can approach the boroughs and districts in those areas to be able to ask them to put forward their schemes. Two things came out of the Universal Services Select Committee this morning with some very good ideas, and having spoken to Patrick and Tim, we are very happy to take those on board. The first is the idea that there should be a self-assessment form and a self-assessment formula that communities can use to take a look through the various criteria, look at what the costings might be, and work out whether this is an opportunity for them to bring forward ideas themselves. And secondly, the idea that we should continue to review this policy. We should look at how it's implemented and how it works, and we should review it in a year's time to see how that's happening. And so I can assure you that's what we will do within the recommendations that we have. That enables us to do that. But most importantly, I come back to the fact that there are many parts of the county that would like us to consider these schemes. This enables them to have a clear route by which to do so. There will inevitably be an initial pressure on us while we have to manage that. And as I confirmed this morning, we've been looking for and talking to external consultants who can support us with the capacity issue that will create. And we will have, as I said, the process through which we can hopefully begin to deliver this over the next year and then review it in a year's time. So, sorry for the very long monologue, but hopefully that answered all of the points that everyone had made. The recommendations that for the introduction of the 20-mile-an-hour limit is on, or the 20-mile-an-hour policy, they are on page 25 in paragraphs 2 to 3. I'm very happy to agree those, and I hope very much we'll begin to see some of the applications coming through very soon. Most importantly, thanks so much to everybody who's worked so hard and been so patient with all of us politicians as we've moved towards making sure that we've got this policy, which I think is actually quite a substantial change for the County Council. So the next item is the capital programme, which rather helpfully is not at the end of the decision day today, so Maria gets some time to actually talk us through it, rather than unlike last time where poor Maria was squeezed out at the end of a very long discussion about road closures elsewhere. Maria and Patrick.
Thank you, Councillor Adams-King. Again, another item that we talked about at the Select Committee this morning. Quite a detailed paper, quite a complex paper, but we've tried to distill it down into the key points. I mean, it's the 3-year capital programme, which you'll see from the paper is still very significant. What we've tried to do is split the paper down into different branch areas, so you can see the different branches and which parts sit within each branch. Helpfully also not just actually setting out the schemes and the value of the schemes, but we've tried to also bring out the funding sources for those schemes as well in the different areas, so that you can fund it for a variety of different areas. And the other thing that's actually helpful that Maria's brought out in the report is the actual challenges we face, which I know are many and varied, and you'll see that both in the capital report and the revenue report as well. But again, I'll let Maria talk us through some of the headlines from that.
Thank you, Patrick. I was prepared, to be honest, for a brief sort of headline summary of it, because I notice you do have a busy agenda. So I was basically going to kick off with the fact that there are 13 recommendations, so quite a few recommendations. I won't go through them all because the paper has been circulated. There are some standard recommendations there for exec member to recommend to Cabinet and Council for the approval of the capital programme for 24-25, and then the provisional allocations for 25-26 and 26-27. There are some recommendations there for the carry forward as well, and also for the revised capital programme for this year, 23-24, which is at about 207 million. And there are then 9 recommendations that deal with programme changes, and 7 of those sit within highways and transport, and 2 of those are within property. The transport schemes, some of those, I think three of the approvals are impacted by the DfT change control, and we are still awaiting the outcome. We were hoping we'd have received that by now, so they are subject to that outcome being positive. If not, then we'll need to bring further options to future decision days. The 3-year programme is compiled with colleagues within Hampshire 2050, as well as Universal Services and Corporate Finance. As Patrick mentioned, it's split into 2 parts, the revised capital programme and then the forward programme. The forward programme totals about just over £329 million. 75% sits within highways and transport, and there is a summary table in paragraph 59 that just gives those headline splits. Key challenges, as Patrick mentioned, inflation is still a key challenge to the programme and still could cause disruption to the programme. Although inflation is showing signs of receding, it's not expected to be reflected in the tender prices for some time, so it is still, you know, very, very much a problem for us. In order to deal with that, capital work can be paused or delayed if that remains appropriate. Delaying doesn't always solve the problem because that can also incur expenditure. So we just need to monitor those schemes and work collaboratively with the supply chain to make sure we make the best decisions for the capital programme. As I mentioned earlier, the allocations for the sort of years 2 and 3 are provisional. So whenever we get to the annual report, we do need to look at those schemes that had provisional allocations, review them, adjust them if necessary, and in some cases remove them from future years' programmes. The report does detail some of the schemes that we've had to remove because the funding hasn't come forward, or that have had to be reduced in value. I won't go into the different values for each of the branches because I think that's quite clear in the report. There are 5 appendices that detail, as Patrick mentioned, the programmes and the funding. Just to remind you, you won't see all the schemes, obviously, because these are just schemes that are being entered into the capital programme for the 24-25, 25-26 and 26-27 programmes. So it's not what the expenditure is likely to be. They are mainly starts-based programmes, so it's those schemes that will be entering. Lots of detail in the report, and as I mentioned, there are 5 appendices giving even more programme information. So I'll leave the summary at that point.
Super, thanks so much, Maria. Actually, I did it in a slightly different way to the last one. Rob, did you want to kind of run through the debate we had at Universal Services Select Committee this morning? We had again, a similarly good and comprehensive conversation about this.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. We had again a very long discussion about the capital programme, about what should be included, fully understanding the constraints that the council is under. I think one of the points made by one of the councillors, Councillor Curls, one was that the key issue a lot of us think about, given the state of our roads, we've got to think through the whole issue of how we, over time, try and improve the quality given the budgetary constraints. Now, and all the councillors, the Select Committee this morning, we're very aware of that discussion, but I think we fully support the capital programme, obviously hoping we can do more with less and see that it's a real challenge to the officers in carrying that out.
Exactly that, yes. So comments from colleagues as well. Tim?
Yeah, I think Rob's summarised it quite well, and we think we support the proposals under the circumstances, and sort of thank the staff for the work put into the report. Thank you.
Super, thanks. And Sarah?
Ditto Councillor Groves.
Okay. Thanks. Jackie, anything to add? No. And Russell?
Well, it's great that there's such support for this. I think we can all be very proud of this capital programme, councillors and officers. It's great that Hampshire County Council can afford to do all of these wonderful things. From my side, there's just over 10 million going into Countryside for important things, fixing bridges and footpaths, also Hayling Billy Trail, more of which later. But also I wanted to mention just over 60 million of capital spend in the property services team, which is all going to be very well spent on upgrading the energy performance of our buildings, which is a really important thing for reducing costs so that we actually have lesser expenditure on gas and electricity, but also meeting our carbon targets for decarbonisation. Yeah, I'm very pleased that we've got this before us.
Yeah, exactly. I think that echoes entirely my views as well. I think it's worth just reflecting that you might quite reasonably look at the consultation that we're currently beginning to say, how do we manage our money, you know, in what are really tight financial times, and question how can we still afford to do all of these various different pieces of work. And the important thing to emphasize is that so much of this comes from different pots of money that are specifically for these purposes, and there is an enormous amount of work that goes on behind the scenes. Number one, to look for various grants and different pots of money from government where we can afford to carry them out. We talked about one just a minute ago with the Transforming Cities Fund schemes, and you know, we have been very, very successful in Hampshire in attracting that kind of money and enabling us still, despite the tight financial times, to enable us to still carry out so many of these different schemes. And that is a huge credit to the team who are so successful in doing that. And so I think all of us, certainly this morning, everyone expressed their thanks for that, because it is a detailed and vital task that everyone plays a part in. So the recommendations are in paragraphs 2 to 14. They're on pages 63 to 65 of the report. I'm very happy to agree those. And so we move on from the capital bit to the revenue bit of the budget, which is the more challenging side of the equation, sadly. Patrick and Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Adams-King. You're right, the revenue budget report is in the pack for 24-25. It contains a number of different parts. I'm going to bring Jenny Wadham in just to talk us through the headlines in a minute. But in essence, it sets out the context for the local government settlement that we've received and what this really means for the county council, but also what this means for the directorate as well. And you'll see within that the amount we're seeing increase for the directorate isn't covered by the settlement that we've got. So therein lies some of the challenge that we face. I think the other part I was just going to bring out before I hand over to Jenny is the importance of income to the Directorate. So what you'll see in there is the cash limited budget, but we also talk about the gross budget, and 45% of which is actually income and recharges, and the importance therefore of generating some of that income. The final bit I was just going to bring out was just talking about the challenges and the priorities for the Directorate. So within the report, there is quite a lot of detail around the challenges and the priorities, but I'll hand over to Jenny, who'll just take us through the headlines of the report. Jenny, please.
Thank you, Patrick. Yep, so the report starts off by setting the wider county council context, and the local government finance settlement that we had just before Christmas was broadly in line with expectations. So we saw an increase in core spending power, our funding resources, if you like, of 6.5%. However, across the council, we've increased the cash limits by 12% to cope with inflation pressures, etc. For universal services specifically, our budget has increased by 6%, up to 156 million for 24-25. That includes things like inflationary uplifts for the highways maintenance contract and the waste disposal contract in particular, which are index linked and so increase in the autumn in line with inflation at that time. Also, we've added funding for pressures to the budget, including things like the removal of our ability to charge for DIY waste at the household waste recycling centres that came into effect from the 1st of January this year. A number of assumptions within the cash limit, just a couple to pick out. The main one is that we are assuming we will deliver all cash flow from our cost of change reserves, some of the savings that we have yet to achieve from the T21 and SP23 programmes. So we still have waste-related savings in T21. And also just to add that the inflation for the pay award for 23-24, but also for the 24-25 year is currently being held centrally. So that will be added to the universal services budgets as we go through the year. That's really all I wanted to pull out without going into any more detail into things.
No, and similarly, we had a very good and detailed conversation about this morning, of which that question about the pay settlement formed part. So thanks for clarifying that. Rob, did you want to talk through any of the conversation at Select Committee?
I think the key thing that came out this morning in the discussion that was of importance is the discussion about waste management, is the fact that the government keep on changing the rules of the game, and both the county and the districts have to react to that, and that makes any kind of revenue planning on a couple of year basis incredibly difficult for both the county and for our district colleagues. And that came up several times in discussion about the difficulty of trying to focus on that and about what we're going to have to do, and obviously the difficulty in realising the SP21 and 23 savings in waste if the rules keep on changing. And I think that's a crucial backdrop to any revenue discussions we make, is that some of these things really are not of our choosing at all, and it's a real challenge for the officers producing revenue budgets in those changing circumstances. And I think that was a key point of the discussion this morning.
Yes, indeed, and I'll mention that a little just in a minute, but that's helpful, thanks. Tim and Sarah. Tim, would you like to say anything in respect to this one?
Yes, thank you. Yes, just to add to what Rob said, very concerned about the effective cuts to services. And as Robert pointed out, the intergroup partners possibly having different positions, and also the change in the government position as well, means no action on improved recycling. And that is very concerning to me. I think we almost need to sort of ignore what the government's saying and say what's right for Hampshire, and we should have that policy. I mean, I think, we need to get a solution. We need to get it quick. Otherwise, we're just in the same bad situation we're at the moment with regard to recycling. Also aware, of course, that waste reduction is even more important, and obviously we need to concentrate on that too. So that's just a bit of guidance and my thoughts on it. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And Sarah?
You're just very concerned at the amount of the pressures that Hampshire County Council and other local authorities are having, and everything can change with the general election due this year. But as regards the waste and recycling, I mean, we haven't got a very good record on recycling, and Yeah, just concerned about that as well. Very difficult times.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks for that. And Jackie, anything to add? Nothing to add. Russell, did you want to add anything to this one?
Yeah, just to echo what's been said, I do share a general sense of alarm about our revenue position. My note of optimism is that I think in Hampshire we are good at working across different organisations, and I think our strong relationship with our partners at district and borough level is going to be important over the next year and beyond to identify alternative delivery models where we can that are in the interests of our communities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, we do have a difficult situation, as everyone has had over the last few years, and you know, the inflationary pressures that we've had have been uneven, which has been part of our challenge. And I think all credit to the teams in keeping those cost pressures down as much as they possibly could. But the inflationary pressure, for example, for the materials that we use when we're carrying out road repairs has been running at over 20%. And somehow we have to take that into account when we are looking at our budgets and the way we do things. The one thing that was apparent when we were talking earlier today, I reminded everybody of it, which is that when we carried out the initial consultation into our budget pressures last year, it's clear that people in Hampshire are opposed to any cuts in services and would like us to look at different ways of finding money. That inevitably will mean that we look at ways by which we can raise money. And so that forms quite a substantial part of our proposal going forward. But we are hampered, and we're hampered exactly as Jenny mentioned by things like the requirement by the government that we can no longer cover the cost of processing DIY waste by making a small charge for it and have to manage it for free. That's a good thing for everybody because they can get rid of their DIY waste without charge, but it does mean that we have an additional pressure of £2 million, the cost of which we need to pick up, and that inevitably means that we have to look at services elsewhere to be able to use that money. A few years ago, 20 plus years ago now, when Project Integra, which is the partnership that deals with all of our waste and recycling, was set up, we were ahead of the game. We were looked at by the rest of the country as being, you know, the exemplar for recycling. And unfortunately, what has happened is that our infrastructure, having been created at that time, is no longer at the forefront of what we need to do. And that's why we've been looking for some time at a new system. We thought we were there last year, and then the government changed the rules around recycling again in the autumn, and so we're back to square one. We are working together with all of our district and borough colleagues and the two cities, Portsmouth and Southampton, to look at ways by which we can manage that. We're hopeful that we'll get to the point by the end of March that we have a proposal in place, which means that we can bring it forward, because the one thing I am absolutely sure of which I'm absolutely sure is that everybody in Hampshire wants to recycle more and they want to play their part. And just this afternoon, I've had a couple of emails in from people saying, why can't we do more? Why can't we be like other areas? And the issue is that we just need to find the right system and the make sure that the back office part of that, the way in which we handle that recycling, is managed in the way that it should. So we're nearly there, and we are getting there, and we will be working very hard with all of our partners to be able to deliver that. It is a there are shifting sands, unfortunately, which make it a more tricky job than it might otherwise be. Just to say the final thing, I'm really sorry, Sarah. I don't think necessarily a change of government is going to help us enormously. I think we have to rely on our own resources, and we have to find our way of doing things ourselves over the next couple of years, because I'm not sure there's loads of money in the system to come and help us out. But at the end of the day, we have to prioritise the most vulnerable people. That's why the County Council exists, to support those people, and that's why we have to look at all of the costs and the revenue pressures that we currently have. So the recommendations for this part of the report are in paragraphs 2 to 3 on page 105. Thanks to everybody who's worked so hard to pull them together, and Jenny's team. More importantly, thanks to all of you for the helpful debate and comments this morning at the Universal Services Select Committee. I'm happy to agree those. And we go on to item 6 now. I just need to explain this one. I declare an interest in this item, which is why I'm not going to make the decision. I'm going to ask Russell whether he would take over for me. It's a traffic order proposal for a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit on Redbridge Lane in Nursling. The reason why I declare an interest is that it's in my own division, and it is something about which I've spoken to the local community and have advocated in the past. So I would be predetermined where I meant to make the decision, and so I'll hand over to Russell to manage this one for me, if that's okay.
Thank you very much, Nick. So just to remind everyone, I'm Russell Oppenheimer, and I'm Executive Member for Countryside and Regulatory Services, standing in on this particular decision. So I will hand back to Nick once I've taken this decision. And I'd like to ask Patrick if he'd like to introduce this report.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Oppenheimer. It's the report in front of you is about Redbridge Lane in Nursling, and this is with a short 40-mile-an-hour section of the lane, which we're looking to regulise to make that 30 miles per hour to accord with the speed limit either side of it. And principally, this is due to the changes that we've seen with the built environment in that area. So we've got the school where we have a number of children crossing in that space. We have an increase in pedestrians in that area, an increase in cyclists in that area as well. So what we're looking at is making sure we can regularise that speed limit to accord with that either end. That was all I was proposing to say. I've got Tim Lawton with me, one of my team. Tim, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, I think you've covered it, Patrick.
Okay, thank you, Tim.
Well, thank you very much. And let's see if anyone would like to comment on this decision report. Councillors, well, I'll go to Select Committee first. Rob McAtter, would you like to make any comment?
No, thanks.
Jackie, no. And would any of our opposition colleagues like to comment? So I guess I'll start with Tim Groves, if he's there. No, I don't think so. So Sarah, anything to add?
I think it's a good idea. Pretty supportive of that, especially where safety is concerned. So yeah, pretty supportive of it.
Thank you. I think for me, it just shows that things change. You know, where we get development, housing, or other, buildings, it does affect traffic flows, and there is a need to then adjust speed limits. And I think this shows that where there is a change in driver behaviour or in the requirement, Hampshire is prepared to take action. So I'm pleased to be able to stand in for Nick in making this decision. Nick, as the local member, you've already spoken, but did you have anything else you wanted to say?
So all I'd say is that just to explain that the cost of this change comes as part of a Section 106 agreement, which looks at a change to a junction at the end. There's been a large estate built along this road. There's one section that remains 40 because it was once a country lane, but since then there's both the entrance to a school and 2 entrances to a big new estate that have been built along it. So the nature of the road's changed considerably, and the cost of the change is tied up with something that we talked about a little while ago, which were changes to the junctions on Romsey Road in Nursling, which is also happening. So it's something that is kind of part of that scheme, but still needs to be decided here. So thanks for taking the decision today, Russell.
No problem. Tim, I see you've put your camera on. Councillor Groves, did you wish to comment on this at all?
Yeah, no, I don't have any comments, but thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, I shall move to the decision then. And I believe that's at paragraphs 2 to 3 on page 129 of our papers. And I would like to confirm that I'm happy to approve the recommendation. And with that, I shall hand back to Councillor Nick Adams-King.
Thank you very much, Councillor Russell Oppenheimer. So you'll be glad to know there's only one more for me. This is agenda item 7, bus contracts for the Basingstoke area, on page 141 to 148. Patrick and Lisa.
Thank you, Councillor Evans-King. We regularly bring reports here about renewal of bus contracts. I'm going to hand straight over to Lisa to talk us through the 4 bus services in Basingstoke. So Lisa, please.
Of course. Afternoon, everyone. So this report takes us through the business as usual retendering of 4 bus services in the Basingstoke area. That's the 4, the 12, 15 and 17, which operate as one service, the 14 and the 74, with new contracts proposed to start in April this year. The contracts are proposed to last for 1 year due to the ongoing uncertainty as to funding for public transport in the future, and also because we have, as directed by the Department for Transport, tendered for a like-for-like service, so the same level of service as we receive now. And we know that costs have increased, and therefore, in order for us to award contracts for a like-for-like service, we're looking at topping up our contract contributions by about 50% from the local transport grant, which we receive from government. So the contracts will be awarded with passenger transport funding. There's a bit of developer contributions in there too, and some funding from Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council, plus the top up from the local transport fund too. And those reasons are the reasons why we're looking at 1 year contracts rather than what would be standard, which would be our 4 year with 2 year extensions. So as I've mentioned, there is no change in service levels. We're proposing like for like, and the new services would start on the 2nd of April, just after Easter.
Super. That's all very clear. Thanks very much, Lisa. Now, Tim, any comments to be made?
Sorry, yes, no, I don't have any comments. Thank you very much. Yeah.
We have the same problem as me getting off mute then for a minute. Sarah?
No further comments, thank you.
Okay, and Rob and Jackie, anything to add?
No comments.
No, all good. Russell?
No comments from me.
No, all very much business as usual. Thanks so much, Lisa. The recommendations for this one are in paragraphs 2 and 3 on page 141. I'm very happy to agree those, thanks. And that's it for my bit of the decision day. Thank you very much, everyone, for your input for my items. So Russell, over to you for the next bits.
Thanks, Nick. So I just need to remind everyone watching that you are now attending my virtual decision day, which continues to be webcast on YouTube via the County Council website. And since I have no public deputations, I will move to my first item, which is item 8 on the agenda, the annual review of the policy for the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000. And I'd like to ask Patrick Blogg to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Councillor Oppenheimer. This is a report that we're required to bring, giving an update on the policy for the use of covert investigative techniques, which we need to have and which we need to get approved. We're required to get it approved every 12 months. It's quite a technical report, as you'd expect, a formality, but it sets out in the report itself where we use these investigative powers and the sorts of things we use them for. We do report this to the audit committee where we do use them. We had no instances in 22-23 in the use of that, but the report really stands alone. It's a formality for this meeting, but happy to take questions where I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. And I'd just like to ask any members in attendance if they'd like to comment. So firstly, Councillor Groves, Tim.
Yeah, no comments. Thank you very much.
Okay. Sarah Pankhurst, do you have any comment on this?
No comments.
Okay, thanks. And any other councillors, Rob, Jackie, or indeed Nick, would you like to comment at all?
I'm quite happy, thanks. Russell.
Thanks. I think this is an important piece of business. It is business as usual, but it's important that we do it. I believe that every year someone has to approve the new policy because it's an annual review. And I think this is the first time that I've done it, because I think previously it was approved by the leader. So I think it's good that it's come into my portfolio. I'm happy about that. And we did have a good discussion about it when we had our briefing, and I'm satisfied with the policy. So I will move to my decision, which is at paragraph 2 on page 149. And yeah, I'm happy to agree that the policy is adopted, which is Appendix 1, and I approve the policy. Thank you, Katie. So that brings us on to the next agenda item, which is the project appraisal for the Hayling-Billy Trail. And I think we've got Joe here, but Patrick, would you like to introduce the report initially?
Thank you, Councillor Oppenheimer. You're right, it's the report for the Hayling-Billy Trail Northern section. It's a project appraisal that then goes on to give approval for implementing that. Again, reasonable amount of detail in the report setting out the rationale. If I just pass over to Joe Heath and Laura Boynes, who are here to support the paper, just to add any points of interest to members. Thanks. Joe, Laura.
Thank you. Yeah, just to say that the Hayling-Billy Trail is a disused railway line that forms part of a long distance Shipwrights Way and also the National Cycle Network, and is now extremely popular with walkers, cyclists and horse riders. And this project aims to provide an all-weather surface for pedestrians and cyclists, with also an unsurfaced element path running alongside it for equestrian use. The idea behind it is obviously that so it can be used all year round. And the cost of these improvements is estimated to be £600,000, which will be funded from the Active Travel Fund. So I'm really pleased we bring this project before you today to seek approval, so we can actually, improve this really important route on Hayling Island. It's well supported locally and by the Borough Council, Havant Borough Council. But Project Manager Laura is here if there are any more detailed questions. I'm sure she'll be able to help you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks a lot. And I know a lot of work has gone into this, and I know that Laura and the team have been in touch with the local member, Councillor Quantrill, and also Havant Borough Council about it. And so they've been involved throughout, and they're delighted. And I'm sure the whole local community is going to be delighted about this. Well, I haven't made the decision yet, so I'm sort of preempting myself. But I think it is a very good story. Yeah, I'm sure that other councillors will also be supportive. Councillor Groves, do you wish to say anything about the Hayling-Billy Trail?
It's just to say it sounds like an excellent project. I don't know the detail, but it sounds excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pankhurst, anything to add from your side?
No, fully supportive. Very
Thanks.
Nice project.
Great. I mean, one of the good things about this is that you'll be able to go on the Billy Trail with more types of bike. You won't need necessarily to have a mountain bike. You might be able to go on with a hybrid, because the surface will be a much better quality surface. Councillor McAtter, you are an experienced cyclist, and I'm sure that you, on behalf of the cycling community, will wish to say something supportive now.
Thanks, Justin. I have used the Billy Trail many times in its current state. It's quite wet at times, so you see a lot of slightly middle-aged men on quite expensive mountain bikes using it. The joy of the Billy Trail is it's for non-cyclists. You see here the weekends, you see a huge numbers of families with young kids using it. It's totally off-road, and I think anything we can do to make that surface more attractive to people who don't cycle every week is a really positive feature for the group. Certainly talking to local cyclists, it's a very positive thing to upgrade a trail like that. It's a fantastic facility for the people of not just Hayling Island, but the whole part of that southern part of Hampshire.
I think that's very well said, and I think that there will be economic development benefit to Hampshire from tourism, and I think the paper says that. Any other comments from Jackie? Or yeah,
yes.
Jackie.
Yeah, just to say, I totally agree with everything Rob said, because obviously I use it a lot. My family cycle down it regularly, and one of the real benefits, which I hope will happen, is you will get the cyclists off the one road off Hayling, which, you know, if you get behind a cyclist on that, it can be a bit of a nightmare. So hopefully it will be used by the commuters as well, which at the moment it's only sometimes, because it's obviously, as Rob says, at times it's not really particularly navigable. So yeah, I'm totally in favour of it and look forward to it.
Thanks. And there's also a big utility benefit with e-bikes. People will increasingly, I think, commute using the Hayling-Billy Trail if they go to work, you know, off the island, which a lot of people do. Nick, did you wish to say anything?
No, only to say this, I think, is great news. It's another example of us doing something really useful with money that we've attracted for Hampshire, which is brilliant. So yeah, well done.
Yeah, that's right. It is indeed active travel fund money from the Department for Transport. So you know, well done for applying for that money, and then for finding this excellent way of spending it, upgrading this surface. So thank you, Laura. Thank you, Joe. And I'm very happy to approve the recommendations in para 2-3 on page 183.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right. That was my last non-exempt item today. So the final item on the agenda is actually exempt. So at this point, I'd like to thank everyone for attending and observing today before reading the formal exclusion, which will lead to the ceasing of the webcast. So the exclusion reads as follows: that the public be excluded from the decision day during the following item of business, as it is likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, that if members of the public were present during this item, there would be disclosure to them of exempt information within paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972, and further, that in all the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemptions outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information for the reasons set out in the report. So, having read that, can I ask you please to end the webcast?
Okay, I'll confirm as soon as we've stopped.